In the world of modern day journalism, the news never sleeps. The off season does not mean you're taking a break. Potentially, it means you're doing more. And that is very true for myself and also my guest on this episode of Mic Drop, made possible by the Believe Network and available everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. And my guest for this show will be Nick Farabaugh, colleague of mine in the Pittsburgh media market and throughout the Sports Now family of networks at Steelers Now, as we will talk about the Steelers offseason so far, the hiring of Arthur Smith as the new offensive coordinator, the hire that fans have probably been waiting for since prior to Matt Canada finally being fired, has now been made, how that will impact Kenny Pickett, George Pickens, etc. It's also draft season. Nick's been covering it well as anybody out there at the Senior Bowl, at the Shrine Bowl, and we're both going to be at the Combine coming up. So we'll get his take on who the Steelers are looking at, what do you think the Steelers are going to do, and then even his thoughts on a West Virginia Mountaineer player that I covered directly in Zach Frazier, and if he's going to be connected to the Steelers. He's connected, but will he eventually be drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers? A lot of people are saying that is going to happen, but I get almost more pessimistic the more people say it, even though it makes tons of sense. So without any further ado, I will bring on my friend and colleague, Nick Farabaugh. Nick, how you doing, man? I love how you're letting the flow hang out.
Yes.
In the winter months. You do it to keep warm? Sometimes I know you do pull it back.
Yeah. Sometimes it's to keep warm. Just having a good day, though. The curls are kind of curling, and,
they are curling.
We kind of let it pop when it needs to pop. So I'm doing that right now, It's a good switch up, too. Sometimes it can get a little boring just pulling it back all the time.
Okay.
You need to switch up the look sometimes. Sometimes you do need to let the flow go.
That's true. And I think when I first met you years ago, you had this flow, and then you pulled it back, then you went back and forth. I've never seen you with a full-on buzz cut like Asti style. But outside of that, maybe in the summer that'll happen. But you are bringing the flow game right now. So you win the hair award here, as I do have a hat on so far on this show. But to get right into it, Nick, the Steelers hire Arthur Smith. Some think it makes sense for at least who's on the roster. Some are upset because they wanted the roster to change, even though even I don't know that wasn't really probably going to happen. A lot of this always connects back to the quarterback play and the future of Kenny Pickett and what this offense is going to do. And Arthur Smith has been an offensive coordinator before, but a run-first team. He's been a head coach, run-first team. Steelers had success on the ground last year, maybe more on the ground, but is that the offense that teams should want in this modern day of the NFL, where it takes strong quarterback play to go far? What are your thoughts on Smith and all of the conversations that have followed Arthur Smith being hired as offensive coordinator?
It's kind of interesting because it's pretty clear that they are recognizing they have limited quarterback play.
Okay.
And it doesn't necessarily feel like to me that they are looking to drastically change that room. We're talking about Kenny Pickett probably being the starter, right? I think that's becoming clear. So that's a big part of this. The guardrails that are in Arthur Smith's system, we're talking about half-field reads, play action, run the ball first, shorten the progressions, make it just 1-2. They run a lot of one-side stuff, whether that's off play action or in the drop-back passing game, where a guy like Kenny Pickett's not going to have to go through a ton of processing. So it's going to slow down the pocket movement. So he's not going to have to spin out of the pocket as much theoretically. He's going to be able to get the ball out quick. The guardrails for quarterbacks in this system are why it can work for subpar quarterback play. It's why Ryan Tannehill was really successful in this system, but it doesn't work for everyone. It didn't work for Desmond Ridder. That was pretty clear. So, you look at a guy like Kenny Pickett and you say, can you do that? If you can't do the bare minimum, if you can't just read one side of the field, get to the right guy, you are not a playable quarterback in the NFL. I think we saw flashes during the 1.5 games post Matt Canada that we saw of Kenny Pickett that he is capable of doing that. So I think we could see Kenny Pickett potentially do that. But that's why this hire was so kind of maligned, I think. And I say maligned because I don't think all of it was true. I don't think that
it wasn't the sexy hire that I think fans are looking for. I think fans and media were maybe some were looking for a sexy hire that was not the case. And I think that's
Right.
why there's disappointment by
Right.
some fans, even if it'll work out.
It wasn't Zach Robinson, for example, for
Right.
the young hot shot from the McVay tree. It wasn't Clint Kubiak.
Yeah.
So it wasn't that. But Arthur Smith is very McVay adjacent. He came up pretty much with Matt
McVay
LaFleur.
adjacent. I like that. by the
Like
way.
he runs a very similar scheme to what Sean McVay did and does. He just needs to evolve it. I think that's what I'm going to be looking for. How do you evolve it? Last year ran so much zone runs. We're talking about he's running the 2019 version of the Sean McVay scheme, while Sean McVay has updated his version to the 2024 version of the Sean McVay scheme. So can Arthur Smith look at his offense and say, all right, these are the changes that need to be made. You can't be running wide zone and just try and hit play action off of that anymore. You could when you were first coming up under, McVay and Shanahan and LaFleur and all these guys, but all of those guys have changed their schemes. They run more gap stuff. Like the Steelers run scheme that they ran at the end of last year with the counter, crunch, trap, all that stuff was very similar to what McVay and Shanahan were doing. Like basically, and this was pointed out to me by Derek Bell, who I work with over at Steelers now. You look at when they played the Rams in LA and their usage of like the very same exact schemes that they run, it's like a mirror. Like they played LA and stole the scheme. Like it was pretty funny actually, but
it's a copycat league, but it's a scheme
it's
you
a
want to steal.
copycat league, but that's the guy that's out in the forefront of everything. If you're gonna steal from a guy, you better steal from Sean McVay. Like there's a lot of better guys you can, there's a lot of guys that you would want to steal from, and he's at the top of the list. So I hope to see some of that element in. I want to see the pulling guard still. I want to see getting downhill. It's an interesting hire, but what happens oftentimes with these types of guys, Arthur Smith is only 41, so he's not a retread that's like 55. We're talking about a guy that is 41, that has play calling experience of a half decade now between the head coaching job and Tennessee. What happens sometimes with these guys is when they get fired from an unsuccessful head coaching gig, especially when you're young, when you're 41, for example, you kind of look yourself in the mirror and say, what do I have to change? What can I do to get back there? Now, Arthur Smith could be one of those guys that thinks he's the smartest guy in the room, doesn't want to change at all.
We've seen that before, right?
We've seen this before.
Coaches do that, yeah.
But it also can be the case that he looks at his tenure in Atlanta and says, okay, what did I do wrong? Let's fix this. Let's do this. And so there's a few things I think that he does really well. I like the play action stuff. Middle of the field is going to be wide open this year. They're going to get that going. If you have often looked at their passing charts and said they don't go to the middle of the field, it's coming. It is 100% coming this year. There's no doubt about it. They're going to run wide zone, but are they going to run gap schemes? Is their drop back passing game going to look a little different than what Arthur Smith has done? Is he going to take some of that, McVay kind of tree stuff? Right now, it's just about 7 to 8 concepts. They run about dagger, they run hank, they run spacing, they run different kind of types of route concepts. They run switch. I mean, just basic stuff. Like if you play Madden, you probably know many of the concepts that they run.
Right, yeah.
But it's not super in-depth crazy stuff. It's better than Matt Canada's scheme. I'll say that for sure. But
and as you're saying, you probably don't want a complicated system. No shade to Kenny Pickett in terms of being intelligent and learning a system. But when you're a quarterback with pressure to figure it out, you're coming off an injury-plagued year where you got benched and you got a lot of pressure. You're playing in the market that you went to college. Keeping it simple is probably the best recipe. That's probably a help to him. That's not a negative. It's not an insult to his intelligence. It's just best right now.
Yes. I think that's a big part of it. I also think the part of it, when we're talking about quarterback limitations is what scheme can get the best out of that type of scheme. And Arthur Smith is definitely kind of one of those. So I look at that and say, okay, where are you going to kind of fit into kind of the personnel of this? And a big part of it, I think, is trying to minimize quarterback weakness. Maybe the Steelers just don't see a real lane this year to getting a guy, right? Maybe, they're picking 20th. They don't have a ton of cap space, and they're going to want to probably identify, offensive line and secondary and want to get that figured out. Maybe what they want to do is they want to build up the rest of the team, give Kenny Pickett one more shot. He doesn't do it. In 25, they've got a ready-made team for a quarterback to come into. Like that, that's very possible, right? That could be the long game.
That could be the long game, and we know everyone really knows the Pittsburgh Steelers forever are all about the long game. Like they are sitting there probably thinking they are the smartest men in the room, and it's worked at times. And they haven't won a playoff game in a while, but they are probably thinking to themselves, "We'll play the long game, and if it's 2-3 years from now when we're in a Super Bowl, won a championship game. We'll sit back and tell all the media, you should have stuck with us. It was a long game. We're not knee-jerk, etc. So that could be the plan that you're detailing. It is ironic they have the 20th pick. That was where they picked Kenny Pickett. He was the only first-round quarterback taken that year, but this is not that year. You're not going to get a first-round QB at 20 that is one of those top guys in comparison to who they fell in love with that year, even if you do get someone later. So this is all about Pickett, and it seems, reading the tea leaves, he's going to get another shot at things. What I do want to touch on before we get back to Pickett, and this goes to your comments about you believe Pickett's quarterback one, and even Tomlin kind of alluding that he's going to have a leg up, I think was kind of the phrasing, even though they will compete, whether it be with Mason Rudolph, who would need to be brought back, or somebody else. A lot of fans want Justin Fields and kind of flasher names, Kirk Cousins, etc. It sounds like that's pie in the sky from pretty much what anybody's saying out there. However, Art Rooney did make some contradictory comments to that recently when he spoke to the media and basically said they're not closing the door on any of that, including going and getting a sexier big name and giving up draft picks, etc., and mortgaging the future for somebody like that. That would go against what they normally do. Usually they bring in a Michael Vick, a Charlie Batch, a veteran QB of Aaron Leftwich, who is cheaper at the time and can win you 2 or 3 games and mentor a young guy in one last shot. That would be like if they would bring Rudolph back, or if they would even bring Tannehill in, who you mentioned is connected to Smith, and that could be that type of guy. Do you believe what Rooney's saying could leave that door open? Do you think he just maybe was saying it, but you still have no belief that's actually going to happen? What were your thoughts when you heard that from him? Because that goes against what everybody else who really follows this team and covers this team believes is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect them to go out and, for example, get Justin Fields. Like, I don't think that's going to be something they do. I don't expect them to sign Kirk Cousins. I don't expect them to sign Baker Mayfield.
Right.
For one, I think Baker Mayfield and Kirk Cousins are going back to Minnesota and Tampa Bay. I think that's a big part of that. For two, I don't think they're going to give up a second or a first-round pick for Justin Fields. Now, I think the door he kept open was, what if something crazy happens? We see something crazy happen every offseason.
We do.
What if I'm just throwing this out there? It's not saying it's going to happen.
Sure.
What if Justin Herbert becomes available for trade? What if the new regime
Harbaugh loves him. That would be something.
Yeah, like this is not going to happen. But I'm just playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
I feel like that's what Rooney was more referring to. Like, if this guy comes available, like Justin Herbert ever came available, like you'd be a fool not to trade. The whatever 3 firsts or whatever it would take to get him. Like, so I don't.
They didn't do it for Rodgers a couple years ago when that was a whole conversation. I didn't believe that was ever going to happen either, but that would be that example.
Yeah, I think this is a little different just because they have drafted a quarterback and maybe they don't see Kenny getting there. But again, I don't feel like they feel like there's a path to it. I think Justin Fields is an interesting conversation just because he probably is pretty cost effective. Like a second round pick for your potential franchise quarterback is nothing. But there's also a possibility they just don't like Justin Fields. Like,
do you like Justin Fields enough that hypothetically in our world that if they would go get him, would he be somebody that you believe would instantly beat out Pickett, would be the starter, could be a Pro Bowler, could do what he did toward the end of last year with the Bears where he showed a little something, and could be your guy that could lead them to a Super Bowl? Because if you're doing that and you're bringing in a Fields, you got to believe he can lead you to the promised land, or then there's really no point of doing it. You can probably get 9 wins right now.
Is he an upgrade over Kenny Pickett? Yes. Is he a drastic upgrade to where I'm going to say he's the franchise quarterback?
Right. That's what I'm asking.
I think that move is a lot riskier than people are playing it up to be. Yes, you get him in here and maybe he's the franchise, but like you got to pick up the 5th year at that point because that's going to be a big decision. And if you turn down a 5th year and trade a second or even trade a first, because there could easily be a team, the Steelers could offer their 2nd round pick at 51st overall. But there are going to be teams in front of them. The Raiders could offer their 2nd. The Patriots could offer their 2nd. Like they might have to give up a 1st if they really wanted Justin Fields. And I wouldn't do it. I think, what Justin Fields did at the end of last year, a little overblown. Like you look at the stats that he actually put up, not the raw stats, but some of the, actual advanced stuff. A lot of it was because that Bears defense really got going and they started to play at a very high level. Now Fields is a guy that when he has a very good defense can get you wins. I think that's very, very, very true. But would I want to give up a 2nd round pick for him? I don't know about that. and I think the Steelers would have to overpay for him. I'm not fully in on Fields like a lot of people are. I think
You
there's
got
a
to
lot.
figure it's a 2 or 3 win swing, or there's no reason to do it. That's a thing.
Yeah, I just don't know if there is. Like, I just don't know if there is. Could I bring in, I don't know, Jacoby Brissett and get very similar results? I feel like I could.
Okay. Yeah.
And I still feel like, I do feel like there is some meat left on the bone with Kenny Pickett. Just because I really wanted to see him more after Matt Canada was gone.
Yeah.
In the 1.5 games he played without Matt Canada were the best 6 quarters he has played. Like, that's the thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not even saying Kenny Pickett's, a franchise quarterback or anything, but when I'm weighing that versus giving up a first-round pick for a guy that is still not proven, and I think there's a lot more red flags with Justin Fields than people will tell you. There are.
Yeah.
I would just rather take Kenny Pickett and see what he's got there, I think, than giving up a first. So yeah, that's kind of my take on that one. I would like to see them upgrade the quarterback position. Like a Kenny Pickett, Mason Rudolph room is yikes. That is not a good quarterback room. But also, you don't want to just burn draft picks just in the name of a slight upgrade for a guy that might be gone in a year. Like,
so you would be more comfortable if you're the Steelers with a Pickett Rudolph return, run it back again, maybe overpay a little bit for Rudolph, but it's open market, you're not giving up draft capital, versus say having to give up that first round pick because it's a later one and make it a Fields Pickett room.
I would rather do that than give up a first for Justin Fields. But I think there are lots of upgrades in the free agency market over.
There's other options out there. Yeah, for sure. And Rudolph can make a decision. If I'm him, I've said this before on shows. I think you've even kind of alluded to this before. If I'm him, I might even want to move on. Like, you kind of fixed your image a little bit with the fans. You're able to have that good end. Leave it there, and coming back and losing a Pickett again, which will probably end up with happening. I don't know if that's what I would want to do. When is Mason Rudolph's value ever going to be this again? This is the time if he wants to get out and get some money or even get a shot elsewhere. But some have also argued that if he wants to try to start, that his best chance might be taking a little bit of a less situation and coming back to the Steelers and trying to beat out Pickett because he's the easiest guy to beat out. That is another thing. Who else are you going to beat out? That's a conversation we'll kind of put a pin in. But what you said earlier about if Pickett doesn't work with Arthur Smith and this hire kind of catering to the roster because they're not going to change it that much. If they bring in a veteran, they have Rudolph, those guys are going to still be able to be put into the Smith system. It's not like you're going to be bringing in something that's catastrophically different. Even Fields could probably fit in if that would to happen. So with that said, what is it about Kenny Pickett that makes him fit in with Arthur Smith so well? And why can this offense work for everybody? And where I'm going with that is a lot of this is a conversation about the ground game, and Najee could explode and Warren could even be better. And that's kind of what they had a little bit last year. And Pickett could work in because you're going to make this simplified. You've talked about that a little bit. But the one player that feels like that does not totally fit is, say, a George Pickens, a receiver that wants tons of stats and is going to want tons of money in the future and already kind of had situations where people believed he's been in his feelings about not getting enough of a look, and that's the life of a receiver. So why does this fit in with Pickett, and can this save somebody like a George Pickens, or are there going to be some players that are just going to have to get used to this because this is a better situation for winning in the roster? Like, are you going to be sacrificing the enjoyment for one for the betterment of the other?
Well, I think it actually fits George Pickens better than a lot of people think. I think
Okay.
Dionate Johnson's the loser.
Okay.
George Pickens can be A.J. Brown. Like, there's no doubt in my mind he can be A.J. Brown. I saw him so many times catch passes over the middle of the field and nearly house them this year that it wasn't even funny. So those play actions where he catches a dig route 15 yards and just has to be one safety, like, we might see a few 70-yard touchdowns for George Pickens.
Okay. That's what he wants.
I don't feel like Pickens is a loser in this.
Okay.
And he's also different than Drake London. So like that's another big thing. He's just a different player than London was. So I feel like Pickens fits this really well. He can be the AJ Brown. I think Dionate Johnson, a guy that is a little smaller, a little tougher to catch the ball over the middle of the field. Great route runner, of course, but probably is going to work more in the drop back passing game more than those play action shots. They can work him on crossers and different things, but he's going to have to block. And naturally he's going to have limitations just because of his frame. So we'll kind of see. I think Dionate Johnson should be a big part of the offense, but he's probably the obvious loser to me. Now, are they going to sacrifice anything with the ground game? I think I don't love how they fit with the ground scheme. Like, I don't love it.
Okay.
This is not a wide zone running team. Like, that is what they are not athletic enough on the offensive line to do it.
Yeah.
So that's when we talk about Zach Frazier.
What do
Johnson,
they need?
right?
We'll
This is
get
when we
into
talk
that
about
too.
that.
Yeah.
Talisi Fuaga,
Yeah.
Tyler Guyton, Amarius Mims, like JC
Those are
Lincoln.
athletes when you're talking about linemen.
Yes.
Like that athletes.
They need athletes up front.
Yeah.
I think also, though, this is what I'm talking about with the slight tweaks. Like, they need to run more of those gap schemes because Najee Harris on those gap schemes is a monster. Now, he's a good wide zone guy, too. He is, but I just like him better in those gap type of areas.
Yeah.
And I think they will work more from that. Jaylen Warren, I think, is going to have a monster year in this system. He fits it very well. And I think Pat Fryermuth should be pretty happy, too.
Finally waiting for him to explode and be fully healthy. It's been a couple more years than I would have thought that would happen.
Yes. But, are they sacrificing, guys for the betterment of Kenny Pickett? Maybe. I just think that what they're really doing here is trying to build an offense that can accentuate the playmakers while making sure Kenny Pickett doesn't screw it up. Like, that's really what I think it is. Like, this is not as much about Kenny Pickett saving Kenny Pickett's progression as it is. This is what this guy is. Let's set like, it's like when you're bowling, right? Like, you have the rails up. Like, all right, the rails are going up for you. Like, all you need to do is hit those pins. Like,
easier said than done, but 100%.
We'll keep you going. Like, we'll keep you going. Like, just go. And so that's what I think this is about. I do think they're going to have playmakers make plays.
Will this allow Pickett to move around a little bit more and be able to maybe do some RPO and kind of make some plays, like more of what Pickett did in college? Or is this going to be more of a game quote? What is the phrase always thrown out there? Is the success of this where the Steelers are going to force Kenny Pickett to be a game manager who occasionally can make plays, or will they let him create the plays by scrambling and changing it up like more of what he did at Pitt?
No, this is in structure. You bet. It's like one field, half the field read, get it out. Like, they don't. Arthur Smith doesn't want you playing backyard ball. But the weird fit with him and Kenny Pickett is, under center, they run under center about 50-60% of the time in this Arthur Smith offense. It's not something Kenny Pickett is really like doing a ton. He's a shotgun first quarterback. So there's going to be a medium here where I feel like they're going to have to meet, which is what I'm going to say. Pistol is back, baby. So they're going to run a pistol probably. Arthur Smith started to implement some different things in the shotgun empty set stuff last year as the year went on.
Yeah.
I'm thinking we're going to see more of that. I don't think you can ask. I think you can ask Kenny Pickett to become better as a play action thrower, to get anticipation. I don't think you can ask him to go under center 70% of the time, turn his back to the defense and expect them to do it. Like, you can't jump in like that. It's going to have to be a gradual transition. So we're going to have a meet in the middle moment here where that's probably going to be the lowest Arthur Smith has had as an OC. He's probably going to be in shotgun more. He's probably going to be in pistol more. And this is why I think a passing game coordinator needs to come on, because they're going to run a lot of the play action stuff. But when the drop back passing stuff comes on, Arthur Smith is not in his element there. It's a little limited, as we talked about, to the concept. So I just want to see some more kind of routes, just dice it up, just get a little bit of influence from whether that's a McVay system, whether that is Sean Payton's system, whoever, Andy Reid. I don't care if it's Eric Bieniemy, for example. Andy Reid influencing, Andy Reid concepts influencing that passing game is a good idea. But I just feel like they need a passing coordinator to spice that up, because it's going to help the transition with Kenny Pickett early in the year. And also what it will do later in the year is, if Kenny Pickett ends up working out in this system, is going to be, okay, you are down 21-10 in a playoff game. We can't run the ball anymore. We can't do this play action.
Yeah, you're right. It's not always going to cater to what you want. 100%.
Right, you need that mode where you can get in shotgun and just pass the ball. Yeah. Well, that's then built in the offense. So that's kind of what you need.
And that's kind of a college mentality. A lot of major programs have a passing game coordinator and separate even from the quarterback coach, where they really all make it about quarterback development. That will kind of be mirroring what happens at college programs a lot of the time. And I think also doing that, Nick, to be fair to the critics, whether they understand it fully as much as you or not, that don't like the Arthur Smith hire because it either wasn't quote unquote sexy, or they feel like it's not modern and he needs to adapt, and they feel like it's not enough of a passing offense, etc. in this modern NFL. If they would do something like that, that might appease some of those critics, because then it would be at least you're recognizing we have this OC that fits the players in the roster. This is who we're going to work with. It could even work with Pickett and Pickens and Harris, etc., and Warren, but he might not be a specialist at the passing game, so we're going to be mature and realize that and bring somebody else in. That would potentially make a lot of sense. We'll see what happens there. Nick Farabaugh of Steelers Now, as we're talking the Pittsburgh Steelers, their offseason. A lot's been going on, and a lot will continue to go on here in NFL draft season. Mike Asti, Mike Drop here on the Believe Network and everywhere you get your podcasts. So as we transition, and you've alluded to this a little bit already, they hire Arthur Smith. We're seeing moves throughout the coaching staff. We're also clearly now aware that Kenny Pickett's going to be on this team and clearly has a leg up as QB1. They may bring somebody else in as a vet, whether it's Rudolph elsewhere, but it's probably going to be Pickett if we're betting. The roster is pretty much set otherwise. What does this team need? Because regardless of Pickett's developing, Rooney also said, and I'm paraphrasing, I'm sick of not winning a playoff game. And obviously Tomlin's coming back, and there was still success last year. That's always going to be a debate that we're going to have every single year about how to evaluate him as a Hall of Famer, but how much longer can you go without winning a playoff game? So the fans, everybody, even the franchise, they don't clearly want to go 9 wins, crawl in, do it because the conference isn't deep, lose right away, have no real chance. Vegas says he shouldn't even be there. You know, you don't even need to book a flight for your next destination. You guys know it's one game and out. They don't want to live that life anymore. So if they don't want to live that life anymore, what do they need to do in this draft realistically to kind of speed up this trajectory and make that not the life they're living? Because they've been living it for almost a decade.
Yeah, well, it's a free agency draft combo. And if you can't get to the level with the quarterback, you beef up everything else.
Right.
The best way for the Steelers to go about this offseason is, first of all, in my opinion, go all out and fix that secondary. Like, get a god-tier secondary. Sign L'Jarius Sneed, sign Jalen Johnson. Go see what you can do. Trade for a guy. Like, you need to make sure that that secondary is elite. And why? Because they have an elite front. They're going to have solid linebacker play. They can sign a third linebacker. I think Landon Roberts and Cole Holcomb are a nice one, too. So, like, I think that they have a chance here to take this defense from good to great. Right? Allowed a lot of yards last year, didn't allow a ton of points.
Yeah.
Well, next year, the goal has to be don't allow a ton of points, don't allow a ton of yards.
Right.
Those turnovers going, right?
Yeah.
So the secondary was the biggest reason that didn't happen. So fix that, because that is the equalizer. That can be your equalizer, right? That can make you go 12-5. Like, look at the Browns. I know they didn't win a playoff game this year, but they got hurt. You know, they got injuries all
without great quarterback play too, because of injuries, etc. And they did it.
And so, you know, I mean, they can get there by doing that. And then I think the second part of that is fixing the O-line. So if you can get a solid center tackle, fix that secondary, I think you have a chance here to, even with, you know, average quarterback play, you have a chance to really make a run and threaten some teams because of what you can do at those specific positions. And so that's really what you have to do. The best way to equalize this kind of field right now of where they are is to make that defense as elite as it can be.
And it feels like you have who you have at running back. They drafted Najee in the first round. We've debated it years ago, but that's still there for next year. You have Warren. That is something that now has emerged for you. Freiermuth is still a tight end that you're working with. The receivers are kind of who you're working with, unless you would move on from Johnson at some point. George Pickens you're not giving up on. Kenny Pickett's going to be back. It does feel like the defense, certainly it's been good. TJ Watt has been flirting with JJ Watt's career, and he has been great when he's in there. But overall, it's been good, not great. Yeah. They went from giving up yards and points to just giving up yards and not points, as you talked about. But they got to still not give up as many yards. And the secondary, Nick, it feels like I've literally been asking you these type of questions. You've been appearing on shows talking about them needing to fix the secondary for the amount of time we've known each other. And it's still a thing. So that would help you maybe pick up a win or two and get to that next level. There are teams that win off of the secondary and flip a game or two, and that's still not happening. And then, of course, the O-line. Now, who are some players that you've either seen at the Shrine Bowl, Senior Bowl, we're going to see at the Combine, you just are aware of that could actually fit into these roles in particular that they could draft? Obviously, Zach Frazier is one that I covered that's dangling out there that I will certainly ask your analysis of Frazier. But outside of him, if they do worry about the secondary more, maybe they can't get Frazier. What do you think they should do? What do you expect maybe to happen in terms of actual players that you're aware of that they've been connected to? Do you think these are Steelers guys?
It's kind of lucky because like the deepest positions in this draft, wide receiver, cornerback, and O-line. Like that is like perfect for the Steelers.
Yeah.
It's a bad linebacker class, a bad running back class. It's not a great defensive tackle class. It's okay because the Steelers probably aren't going to draft those positions. Now, defensive tackle maybe, but
Yeah.
they are going to draft a receiver at some point, and they're going to get a third receiver.
They always do.
And
Yeah.
they can get a solid player in the 4th round, which is like perfect for them, honestly. But if we're talking corner, top draft fits for corner. Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, man. I saw this guy at the Senior Bowl. Best corner, maybe the best player there. He was awesome. He's a long corner. He's 6'3", 195, but he plays stronger than that. He can tackle. He's a press man guy. He and Joey Porter Jr. are mirrors of each other in a lot of ways. Joey has obviously more length than basically any other corner you may have ever seen. But Quinyon Mitchell is a really good player with ball skills. So he's, I think, could be a pick of 20 if you want to go corner there.
Okay.
There's just so many good players at corner. Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terrion Arnold, Nate Wiggins, like Cooper DeJean. Like there are so many good players there. If you want mid-round options, you look at guys like Jarvis Brownlee from Louisville, Kyrie Jackson from Oregon. Like there's so many good players. You're looking at Josh Newton from TCU. Like there are so many good players at corner in this class. If you want slots, there are lots of those. My favorite personally is Dadrian Taylor Demerson from Texas Tech. He's a really good player. He's a very he barks a lot. He's a
I've seen him.
Swag guy.
Yeah.
He's a guy that kind of maintains, he's chirpy, man. Reminds me a lot of CJ Gardner Johnson in a good way. He's going to be a leader for a team at some point. And he's a big-time character guy. He can play safety too, so if you're looking for that running mate next to Minka, can do that and the slot. That's another thing they need to do. They need to add a running mate next to Minka Fitzpatrick.
They're getting older. Minka's getting older. Patrick Peterson obviously is getting older. He already was old when he got there. That whole group is getting older, and honestly was a weakness this past season for whatever reason.
And it was the slowest secondary in football, so they need to add speed. So, some of those guys I mentioned there, at safety, there's a lot of them. Jalen Simpson from Auburn, Cam Kitchens from Miami. There's a lot of really good players at that spot. Now, the offensive line.
I think Kitchens is the one that PFF loved all last season. He was the one that was always their top grade, no matter where they were grading safeties throughout the season. Yeah.
He's awesome, man. He's awesome. Like he's a deep safety. He can be a free safety, but he showed at the Senior Bowl that he can walk up in the slot and man-to-man tight ends. They need that tight end eraser, obviously, with how much the tight ends killed them last year. Yeah. So that's a big part of that too. So there's a lot of secondary talent. I didn't even name some of the guys that they could get.
No, it's a good picture. Yeah, I mean O-line center-wise. I mean, again, and do you think the Frazier thing's for real? Because everybody in the region is talking Frazier to the Steelers. He obviously played at WVU from Fairmont. It would not be a far journey. His family is all about his career. They probably would go to every single game. And he fits, to me, a Steeler mentality that I'd imagine that if Tomlin either saw film or was watching the game because it was on national TV, Frazier's last moment as a Mountaineer, where he got himself off the field with an injury that we later found out needed surgery, to avoid that 10-second runoff in a game that they almost lost as an upset. They did end up winning, and if they would have lost, that probably would have been a situation where Neil Brown's job is less safe. The season is less than what people think of it as now. It wouldn't have been 9 wins even with a bowl. He changed the perception almost of all of last season and maybe himself individually off of that moment, and that seems like that is a heads-up intelligent. I can be a future Jeff Saturday leader of this group. I can be a Pro Bowler, All-Pro, that type of guy, and he is also athletic. And he's been hyped as an NFL pick. When we were at the Combine last year, the question of who's the Mountaineer that's going to be here next year, West Virginia players would say, obviously, Zach Frazier. He could have been here this year. I mean, he would have been a draft pick last year. Does he legitimately, do you think that's a real thing? And then who are the other linemen, centers, if not Frazier to the Steelers?
Yeah, no, it's an absolute real thing. I mean, he is a perfect fit for Arthur Smith's scheme. Like that is perfect.
That too,
He's
right?
a wide zone center. He gets out in space. He moves. And I love his tenacity. He's strong. He's got that wrestling background that they love. Like he's got a lot of the stuff that works
Yeah.
at center. He's gonna be a decade long starter. Like
Somewhere, if not the Steelers, I do think he'll have success. Yeah.
I do, but that feels like the every single year there is one pick the Steelers have that's like, yeah, man, they're gonna draft that
You
guy.
know they're in
Last year,
love with somebody and they try to pretend it's a secret, right?
yeah, like last year, it wasn't Broderick Jones. Like you could say maybe they could draft
Yeah,
Broderick
okay.
Jones if there were other tackles or corners. But Joey Porter Jr. was kind of there, but it was
Yeah.
like, would they actually take him at 17? When he got to 32, it was pretty obvious.
I
Yes.
remember one of the Devin Bush pick because they had to
Yeah.
trade up to get him, but that was one that it was always like, will they really do it? But they love him. And obviously that didn't
Bush,
work out.
Bush was one.
Yeah.
Kenny Pickett
Jet
wasn't
Pickett was
one. I mean,
100%
they
one.
knew they liked him, but like it was a quarterback no matter what. The one I remember the most really being telegraphed was Najee. Everyone knew
Yeah.
Najee
And that
Harris
was
was
our
gonna
big
go
media
there.
debate on whether they should have done that
But
or not. But
like
yeah.
Broderick, yeah, you could have predicted, but it could have been Darnell Wright. It could have been, whoever else. It could have been Joey at that point. But I remember last year, I knew it for a fact they were drafting Keanu. Like I knew that was coming. It was so obvious. I feel the same way about Zach Frazier. I'm telling you, that second round pick, they might even
That's what I
trade up.
mean. Do you think that he would be there for them if they just let
I
the
don't
draft
know.
play out? If they go corner at 20, do you think he would still be there? Because as much as we're saying his value is increasing and he's impressing everybody, every other team's probably impressed too. This isn't
Yeah.
just the Steelers.
So I don't know if he'll be there at 51, but I know they would trade up for him.
Okay,
I
they love him
think they
enough
would.
that they would do that. You
I
think?
think they
Yeah.
would. I think they would. They have 2 fourths. They have some flexibility to go up and maybe give up one of those fourths to go up and get a guy like Zach Frazier, and they should. He's going to be a starter. He's going to be a stud. He's going to be day one in there, an
It's a
upgrade over
safe
Mason
pick. It
Cole.
almost feels like at this point. And you could argue that he would have been a draft pick last year, but I actually think
Yeah,
he increased his value this past season. And I
he
don't think he would
feels,
have been a second round pick last year,
he
but he
just feels like a
should be now.
Steeler. Like he just feels like
He
a Steeler.
does kind of feel that
Like
way. Yeah.
I don't know, man. It in their own backyard, basically.
Yeah.
Perfect scheme fit, like exactly what they need. Now, maybe they
Imagine a
draft.
Mountaineer saving the career of a Pitt Panther too, because that would
Yeah,
be then what would jokingly be brought up, and that connection would be there. And that's not why they're going to draft him. If he played at Toledo and he was the same guy, they would take him too. But that would be an interesting connection based on how polarizing Pickett's been being a Pitt player. So that would
yeah. So
be
Pickett's going to throw to the Penn State tight end and the West Virginia
taking the snap from
center is
the
the
West
snap
Virginia
with the
Mountaineer.
quarterback.
Yeah, hey, I don't. I think Tomlin will take it all over the region and call all those coaches and thank him if he ends up actually getting a playoff win.
Oh, he won't
That
care.
regime
He
for
won't
sure.
care, dude. They'll
No,
draft someone from
100%.
Gannon if that works. I don't
100%.
like,
Yeah,
man.
they
Like,
will. Yeah,
you look at Frazier and he just fits them so well. Now I don't know. Maybe they draft Jackson Powers Johnson. I mean that he fits them very well too. I have a hard time seeing them taking a center in round one. I do. I don't.
where's Frazier on your board?
Frazier's like right after Jackson Powers.
Okay, so
Like in the 30s.
so if they don't take a center in round one, you're then getting to like where you're willing to bet that they're zeroing in on Frazier because they can't go the first 2 picks without him. They would have to almost be willing to trade up.
100% they are gonna.
And it could also be that they think in their mind, Nick, that okay, he's number 2 on our board too, but we need more than just center. We are comfortable with the relatively local kid that is super intelligent, super athletic. He can be our number 1, and we're not going to worry about that 20 pick at center. We will once we punt that pick for center, we'll then go make sure we get Frazier at some other point.
Would not surprise me if the first 2 picks for the Steelers are tackle center. Would not surprise me.
They're kind of Steelers safe picks too. Yeah,
tackle center corner. Anyone be surprised if those are the first 3 picks? Like I wouldn't be. Tackle center quarterback, tackle center receiver, something like that. It'll work out that way, I think. But I really think that Zach Frazier fits like the sweet spot of okay, perfect value for center, starter, local. Like he is the perfect fit. And this is not a case where it's like the guy went to WVU. You got to draft him because he went to WVU. Like he's a legitimately great center. He is going to be a great football player. So I don't think they can miss this one. I think they have to get him. If they don't take Powers Johnson in round 1, I think they have to get Frazier. So I love that, and then we talk about kind of other O-line fits, a tackle. I was telling you about some of those names earlier. Tackle, the Talisi Fuagas, the Tyler Guytons, the Amaris Mimses, the J.C. Lathams. Like,
Yeah, Mims. Yeah.
a few of those names are probably not going to be there 20, but I bet you at least two of them will be. So if Amaris Mims and Tyler Guyton on the board, just take one of them. Like, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
I just think it's such a talent-rich tackle class. Like, it is one of the deepest tackle classes at the top I can remember in recent memory, and it's deep at right tackle specifically, which is very interesting considering I will call for them to move Broderick Jones back to the left side where he is natural. They could draft Amarius Mims and be cool with that. They can draft Fuaga and be cool with that. They could draft Guyton and be cool with that. They are set, man. Like, they have a perfect
Okay.
draft board right now where if you look at it, you say
they have a lot of options.
They
Clearly have the layman would be able to tell you these are the clear positions of need for the Steelers: offensive line, secondary, maybe receiver, etc. Clearly, those are the position of need. And maybe if you want to take a quarterback later, sure, because you're not going to get one of those top guys in the first 5 picks. And you have so much depth at those positions that you're talking about. We can't get all the names on this show, but that just tells you that if they don't end up with Frazier, don't end up with Mims, don't end up with a couple of these players, there's other options that'll still make it a successful draft. There are ways to make it an A, but it's almost impossible for this to be worse than a B- draft unless they really screw it up. It does seem like there's a path to a successful drafter. Nick Farabaugh from Steelers Now. I got a couple more for you. Number one, on the Frazier front, everyone, and this is media of Rivals, media of WVU, media of the NFL, fans of Rivals, fans of WVU, etc. There's nobody that doesn't like Frazier. It doesn't appear. All the Frazier comments are respect him, intelligent, athletic. He would be great. Are there any negatives of Zach Frazier that you could see that actually could prevent this guy from being a future Hall of Famer? Because it seems like everyone and their brothers inducting him in Canton in 15 years, regardless of what team he plays on, that always makes you nervous. He is coming off of an injury, even though he appears to be impressing at these events, even though he's not actually literally playing because, again, he's recovering from an injury. And then separate from Frazier, before we do close up shop here, I do want to get your thoughts. You didn't mention him earlier. I know you covered him. I wrote about him. You gave me content to write about him. Frazier's teammate last year at WVU in Beanie Bishop, who went from group of 5 to didn't work out in the Big Ten. People thought he's not an NFL player to a consensus All-American that arguably could have even been better and left some picks on the field, and now probably is going to be an NFL player when that was not the case a year ago. He's also a big personality. For anybody who doesn't know that, watch the videos, read the writing from Nick and I about Beanie Bishop. So I do want to get your thoughts on Beanie before we close up shop here. But are there negatives? What are the negatives of Zach Frazier that could actually derail this of not being the career that everybody thinks it'll be?
Well, I'm not sure if I'm putting him in Canton, but he's
I'm
not
exaggerating, but you know what I'm saying. That there's
right.
nobody. If you right now Google search negatives of Zach Frazier, it's going to be tough to read any.
He's just such a solid player. So, I mean, first of all, he doesn't have great length. Most centers don't, but longer tackles will be able to get into his frame a little bit and push him back.
Okay.
He's not like an elite lateral athlete, which can have issues. But I look at this guy, man, and say, wow, is he not just such a solid player? Great pad level, of course. We talked about
there's enough there to like that you're not going to worry about the negatives.
Yeah,
that kind
he's
of the
strong
thing?
too. He's got great grip strength. His core strength is great. He's just so solid. And he's a better athlete than people will give him credit for. Little stiff in the hips, but not too stiff to where it's like, I can't get him, out in space or anything. So is there anything that can derail it? I mean, sure, that length may be becoming a bigger problem where he just can't kind of anchor down, but I don't see it happening.
He's really mature too, I will tell you.
Yeah.
Like if he is on the Steelers, especially with a quarterback that has his career in flux, would not be shocked in a year from now, people are saying Zach Frazier should be a captain. I mean, he is that much of a leader of men. He's been a leader at WVU forever. High school, he was a leader. He's married. Like he's basically acting mentality wise like he's 35 years old, even though he's in his early 20s. So that's good from that position. That I wouldn't be shocked. WVU Pitt thing's kind of funny. Him and Pickett might become best friends. They both have that mature type of thing, very similar personality wise. So I could see that being a benefit too.
100%. He's just such a solid player, and he's got great hand usage. He's a really good player that you should feel like you should just trust. And so I don't feel like a lot of bad things are going to happen there. I feel like he's going to be a day one starter and ready to go. Now, is he going to be an all-pro player? Maybe not. But is he going to be a solid starter that I can trust for 10 years? I think so.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
Beanie Bishop, on the other hand, is pretty interesting. I could tell, I didn't even cover Beanie,
Yeah.
for the whole season, but I did get to talk to him obviously at the Shrine Bowl. Man, he's got a chip on his shoulder. He wears every bit of
To
disrespect
say the least.
he
Yes.
ever gets.
Right.
I love that mentality from that kid. He struggled a little bit in man-to-man at the Shrine Bowl, but also when you look on tape, he's not really that bad there. He's physical. He's willing to put his nose in the fan. He's a great blitzer. He comes downhill, tackles really well, lays the wood, has great ball skills. I can see him, and this is my comparison for him. I can see him becoming a guy like Arthur Mollett.
Okay.
Where, he's only about 5'10", 5'9", but man, he hits hard. He blitzes very well, and he makes plays. And so, he might let up a little bit in man coverage, but this is a guy that you draft in the 4th, 5th round. He'll stick around on your team. He'll be a net culture positive. He'll feed into kind of all of those, negative concerns you got pre-draft. He'll take the 4th or 5th round draft kind of grade as disrespect, and he'll wear it on his shoulder, and he'll become a really nice slot defender for you. And so I really like Beanie in terms of that. Again, not sure he's going to be an elite, slot. I don't think he is going to be, but can he be a really solid player in this league? Absolutely. And he's versatile too. I think that's the other thing.
Yeah.
They played him at corner, slot, and safety. I think he can do a few more things than just slot too.
Yeah, and he was the reason why, because the stat that not everybody knows that maybe surprises you, but West Virginia was right up there in ball hawk rate, almost the whole season. Good, bad, or ugly, they were right up there in ball hawk rate the whole year. That's because of Beanie. I mean, Aubrey Burks was hurt most of the year. That's because of Beanie. He was always right there getting his hands on the ball, had 4 picks, could have been more. But I think the great part about Beanie is what you mentioned at the beginning of that story. It does not matter where he's drafted. He's going to find a place. Even if he's not drafted, he'll get in there. And he plays with that chip on your shoulder that you want. His first day to us in the media, he sat there and said, I should have been here last year because Minnesota didn't use me right. Right under the bus, Minnesota. He was the guy that after the backyard brawl sat there in the press conference after a pick and said, we knew this was coming when we watched film. Phil Jerkovic's not good at his job. And actually, Austin Bechtold and I looked at each other like, wow, like that is a lot to hear from somebody that hadn't been this personality before. It's almost like, Nick, he got on a spotlight of a major conference, major program that was winning, that wasn't where he was barely being used at Minnesota, and just decided, I'm going to unleash my personality. And maybe there are some NFL fans that won't like that from a 5th round pick. If he tries to drop bombs with the media as a 5th round pick who's trying to make a team, I could see that maybe being a negative. I could see certain coaches, like if, say, Bill Belichick was still around and put him on the Patriots back in the day, he wouldn't love that and would try to silence Beanie. But if Beanie can be in a situation where he can be himself and can play with that chip on his shoulder, then I think the sky is a limit for him, regardless of where he is drafted. And he's a guy that it's hard to root against because he really does take everything personally. If like this show, if he would listen here, he probably would be zeroing in on Nick Farabaugh. I got to show him. Sounds crazy, but that's the life of Beanie Bishop. And that's generally, Nick, what can lead athletes to have success. Like that's almost, you want that. You like that a little bit. But of course, will it be interesting to see what his personality is once you get to the NFL, though? Because being a consensus All-American in college at a program you're turning around, you can be a personality. When you're a 5th round pick in the NFL, there's going to be a lot of other teammates of his that might eventually tell him, hey, shut up, you're a 5th round pick, like make the team first. So we'll see what his first press conference is, where he is in the NFL. But it is appointment TV. And any media that thinks, oh, it's ho-hum, 5th round pick, I already got this pre-written, we're good. Nah. That is not the life of covering Beanie Bishop. You don't know what you're going to hear. He's almost a player, I think you even told me this, that you want to talk to again. Like you're excited. I got to talk to this guy again, and I got to find a way to talk to him again because you want to hear from him. And the comment's going to be better if he's a 6th round pick or something. Can you imagine that interview?
Man, he's fun, and he wears that chip on his shoulder, and that's going to be for his gain.
Yeah, he really, really does. And it's a shame that he didn't have more than 1 year at WVU because I think he really fit in culturally and personality there. And Minnesota did not use him. I mean, that's proof in the pudding. Great group of 5 success. He's a consensus All-American at WVU, did nothing prior. It's hard not to put that on Minnesota. And he puts it there. So we'll see what his NFL career becomes. Nick, I appreciate the time, man. I'll be seeing you at the Combine for sure. We'll have some steak and beers in addition to covering all these guys in not that long from now, in a few weeks in Indianapolis. So I appreciate it, man. You got to bring the flow game to the Combine too. You're not going to cut it before the Combine. You're going to bring it with you.
Yeah, it's coming. It's coming with me. Don't worry about it.
All right, man.
You ain't missing.
All right. Nick Farabaugh again of Steelers Now, as I will let him go back to his coverage at Steelers Now as they churn content there for us at this sport within the Sports Now family of networks. Again, at Steelers Now. That was Nick Farabaugh. And I will now wrap things up because that was a great conversation with Nick, and there's nothing more I really can touch on or need to touch on. He hit it out of the park. We got to it all. So you can find this in every episode of Mic Drop here, made possible by the Believe Network, everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, Google Play, etc. You can also find me, of course, on social media at Mike Asti 11.